Welcome everybody. Hello from my side. It's today's Calling All Systems sessions. The Calling All Systems format is proudly supported by Dassault Systems, so they are our sponsor and also represented in today's discussion with Gan Wang. Our topic today, I think, is a very exciting one for me as somebody involved with standards and currently being the Assistant Director for Standards Development in INCOSE. It's all about SysMLv2, and the key question is, will SysMLv2 be a game changer for us, for the systems engineers, not necessarily for the tool vendors? So that's basically what we want to discuss today. And I want to start to introduce our fellow panelists, our discussion partners. And I think we will start with Daniel Hettemann. Say a few words about yourself.
So thank you. My name is Daniel Hettemann. I am the Director of Digital Engineering, Modeling, and Simulation within the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering within the United States Department of Defense. My title takes up my whole amount of time, but notionally my focus is on building the community, guiding the workforce across the Department of Defense enterprise around everything related to deploying digital twins, digital tools for the engineering disciplines, and improving our use of modeling and simulation across the entire acquisition lifecycle.
So next up is Sandy. Chris is here. Chris Schreiber.
We figured it out. I got the beach ball tamed.
So Chris, can you introduce yourself in a few sentences, please?
Sure, yeah. So hi, everybody. I'm Chris Schreiber. I'm the chief engineer of our IT and digital enablement organization within Lockheed Martin Space. I do a fair amount at the corporate level as well, but have certainly been involved with SysML and the version 2 of the language since the beginning when Sandy got all of us together to talk about a new version. So been involved in MBSE and systems engineering generically for, I would say, the last 20 or so years.
Thank you. So Sandy, you were already mentioned. It's your turn.
Hi, folks. Yeah, I'm Sandy Friedenthal, and I retired from Lockheed Martin several years ago. I had a full career in the aerospace and defense industry. I've been involved with SysML from the onset, and most recently co-led the development of SysMLv2 along with Ed Seidowitz, and now co-lead what's called the systems modeling community through the OMG.
Thank you, Sandy. So David.
Thanks, Daniel. So I'm Dave Long. I've spent over 30 years in systems engineering, helping organizations raise their SE proficiency. Model-based and digital is a big part of that. First was part of iTech Corporation, most recently leading Blue Hole On. And in parallel with that, a number of INCOSE roles, including the current Director for Strategic Integration.
Thank you. And now from our sponsor, Gan Wang.
Thanks, Daniel. Hi, everyone. I'm Gan Wang from Dassault Systems. My role at Dassault includes sort of helping to execute company's system engineering strategy and to promote MBSE practices in the industry. That includes the standardization, at the OMG, and as you know, SysML is a big part of the solution that we offer to our customers. Back to you, Daniel.
Thank you. So I want to open up with a simple question or a short round. Don't go all in on this one now, but what is the biggest benefit systems engineers from your perspective can expect from SysMLv2? Probably we start with Sandy, then Daniel, Chris, and we make the round the other one.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. The SysMLv2 is really a next generation that addresses many of the issues that we encountered with SysMLv1. SysML was V1 was first generation. We learned a lot from it, really helped inspire a lot of MBSE activity and adoption. But SysMLv2 brings substantial improvements over V1. In particular, it's much more precise and less ambiguous. And from an end user perspective, you'll find it to be much more consistent language across the language concept. So it'll be basically, in that sense, it will be easier to use. It's not simple to use, but it will be easier to use just because of the regularity of the language. So whether you're dealing with actions or parts or requirements, they all have sort of the same type of functionality. You can decompose them and specialize them in the same way. So I think that's one of the biggest things that you'll see is just the regularity of the language.
Thank you.
So for me, when I think about the biggest benefit, it really drives into kind of the two major areas. The first being that textual syntax. The textual syntax really gives us some opportunity to see innovation in the industrial base. We're already seeing new startups come and go, these are the capabilities that we can do, or we can deploy AI systems to improve our reasoning because of the power and the capability that the textual syntax really does provide for interoperability. The other part for us is really thinking about that API perspective, the fact that we're going to continue to build out those digital threads, and the API really enables us to connect the digital thread perspective all the way from early mission engineering and architecture in through the systems discipline design, back up through verification validation into early stages of manufacturing. And that's really where, when I look across the capabilities of SysMLv2, we're really focusing on the biggest benefits going forward.
Chris?
You're muted, Chris.
Yeah, +1 to what Daniel and Sandy both said. I agree with both of those statements. I think from our perspective, it comes in two flavors, right? The improvements to the language. So the textual syntax as a feature is really great. Some of the constructs, I think, that more or maybe more comprehensively capture the systems engineering concern from our perspective. And for instance, being able to include the concept of time, having a stronger tie to executability, those kinds of things are all great features of the language that we're looking forward to. But also it's the API and the interoperability concern. I think for us, that's a big deal. We've built a lot of tools. We use profiles. We have lots of extensions to the language that we do, and the API is just going to enable that in a more consistent way. So those are the two big game changers from our perspective, Daniel.
David, maybe?
So for me, I'm going to go with the semantic strength and rigor. For those who know the heritage of UML, 20-some years ago, it actually evolved as a sketching language so that as we were working with software, we had a common notation. Now, over the years, more semantic strength has been built into that, but when you begin with sketching, it's hard to get to a full rigorous semantic basis. SysMLv2 steps away from UML as the foundation. It uses the ideas, but it's built upon kernel. And so there's very rigorous semantics there, which means we can systems engineer with greater accuracy, greater clarity, and that it enables what Sandy, Daniel, and Chris have said, particularly on the interoperability idea within systems and across engineering, because if you don't have that semantic meaning, you never know what you're connecting to. Now we know, and I think that's the biggest step forward.
Thank you. Ganwang?
Yeah.
It's your turn.
Yeah, I certainly agree with everyone on the panel, and it's hard to add the fresh new things, but really the big thing is, to me, the consistency, the integration in the language concept, from the robust meta model and the formal semantics really enables that the extensibility of the language, to grow, to expand, and its ability to support domain-specific applications, right? And we talk about integration is a big deal. with system engineers, be it, digital thread, two-chain integration. Those are some of the big ones. But yeah, so this is, like Sandy like to mention that this is a new thing. It's a brand new thing. That's even though it's a SysML, it's totally new. Back to you.
Yeah, I have one comment to make for the housekeeping department. If you want to interact with us, please use the question and answer module. I cannot keep track of the chat, but if you have stuff, go for the question and answer module. So the next round is because I think it's very important. Some people currently, when I talk to them, have the impression they have to start using SysMLv2 in February in productive projects. And I want to hear your opinion on this. And I think Chris, or I know his colleague Emma, has an opinion on that. Maybe we start this round with Chris. So how long do we have to prepare to really leverage it?
Well, we're still preparing, so I don't have an end to the time span quite yet. No, I guess I would say the experience that we've had so far has been we couldn't have started early enough. And the reason I say that is because sometimes you underestimate sort of the organizational use and how creative we've gotten over the years with being able to use version 1. And so I mentioned some of the tools that we've built on top of the commercial tools and things like that. And what we're beginning to find is that they're everywhere and they need to be refactored. And so that's going to take some time. The other piece is, and we're really kind of just getting into this, but I think there's going to be some conversation at the IW around this, and maybe at the OMG meeting in December. But I think there will be an impact to methodology and how people execute model-based systems engineering using SysML when we have version 2 of the language. And I think you can't start early enough in trying to understand those things. And so, of course, the time spans will be dependent on the availability of tools that implement the language and the APIs and things like that. But for those that are on the line that are in organizations that plan on leveraging it, and you should, I would really start today in trying to understand the implications of that transition. And there's great resource out there that maybe Daniel will talk about that we put into the community and contributed to help with that transition. So Daniel, you can't get started early enough.
Yeah, and I'll echo that. The idea that the best time to start planning for any transition is yesterday. The second best time to start is today. And so we've been very fortunate that I've been able to establish a SysMLv2 collaboration meeting across the federal government with industry and academia. Sandy, Chris, and Gan are all part of this collaboration where we're looking and thinking about how do we share our lessons learned? How do we share how we're starting to do it? We've took the initiative and actually started to develop a transition planning guidance that you can find actually up on the OMG wiki. I'm sure somebody in the chat on my team will be more than happy to post that. So go start reading there. We've already established 7 great products to help with a starter model, some FAQs around tools and ecosystems. But when I think about the timeline of this transition, the great thing about the DoD is our scale. We're going to have programs that are looking to start right away, and we're also going to have programs that are just realistically never going to adopt it. And so we're trying to look at it from that perspective of how do we where we have interested programs that want to dive in, how do we help maybe do some parallel modeling to kind of prove out some concepts? And where do we try to understand the technical debt that we're accepting as the government, where we go, maybe this is a program where we won't do it, or we push that down the road a couple of years. So when we think about a transition of this scale that affects a quarter of the engineering workforce, we're really looking at that decade timeline with great movers in the early phases, but accepting technical debt later in the decade.
Sorry for interrupting, but we have several questions on the transition from V1 to V2 in all aspects. Will there be export-import capabilities? when is a good time to convert and so on, and when can you be part of the leading edge. Maybe we take this to Gan now.
Yeah, so I think a couple of points. I think by now, people should realize the transition is different from a model transformation or conversion. It's a total two different things, right? Transition involves an organizational effort, like Daniel just laid out, really to plan, to have your development strategy, your product strategy. I wanted to say that it's going to be a run and not a step. It's going to be a process, right? You're not going to see the Y2K moment or the Apple drop in the Times Square at the New Year's, right? So it's going to be a long process by which that both V1 and V2 is going to coexist. At least at Dassault System, we committed to supporting both, right? And our philosophy is really for you to adopt V2 at your own pace, based on your mission needs and based on your development needs, right? And for doing that, to enable that, we have both V1 and V2, so we'll have both V1 and V2 support in the same authoring environment, right? And we also supporting the complete transformation spec of the V2, so that when you do want to convert the V1 model to V2, and by the way, there are multiple use cases over there, we can delve into that, we will be enabled to do that.
What I would add to what Gan said, and Gan hit it when he said, look, this is an evolutionary journey. It's not a step change, and it's a value-based decision. Organizations need to assess when it's right for them. As Chris and Daniel said, they need to decide on a per project basis. Where are their pilots starting? When are they making the leap? And there are some projects that should never evolve from V1. It depends on what the overall life cycle is. So we need to be taking a value-based decision on a new project. Where should it start? On an existing project, when should it evolve? When should it transition? Should it even transition? Because while there will be all sorts of automation to help us, the evolution of a model and a team is not a seamless activity. It requires notable investment. And that investment needs to be made in the context of a project's needs as opposed to a technology availability.
Thank you. Sandy, I have one additional task for you. Can you outline what is the best learning resources when you come from SysMLv1 and want to learn SysMLv2 right now?
Currently, there's some resources available on the SysMLv2 release group. There's some tutorial information available. I think we'll have to give this a bit of time. The vendors, the various consultants and the others will be coming out with programs to help to provide those resources. So I would say that over the course of this next year, we'll be seeing growth in those resources. Certainly, the tool vendors are going to come out with training, and some of the other like I said, consulting companies will be coming out with training. But for starters, I think you've got the training material that's available on that release group, and there's also a reference implementation that can be downloaded, if you will, both in the Jupyter environment and in the Eclipse environment, and you can use that as a basis for getting started and just familiarizing yourself with SysMLv2. As Daniel mentioned, as part of his project, he developed a starter model that's useful. So there are some resources available to begin to familiarize yourself with V2, and the community will be developing, the books and the consulting and all that stuff. I'm sure you'll see that over the course of this next year.
So I have a question for Gan. Gan, when is CATIA Magic support for SysMLv2 available?
Great question.
Yeah.
Yes, and yes. Okay.
Yeah, but when is it available?
Yeah. Actually, this is a great setup. Yeah. So we are going to have a major announcement coming. Breaking news on CNN, right? Right. We will have we will launch a SysMLv2 early experience program in early November. Okay. The details will come out when we make the announcement. The early experience program is going to be available to all our existing customers. And as the caveat is that you must have a V1, SysML V1 capability, V1 support at the moment that you can upgrade to, or you're already at 2024X, and the support will come with R2. Okay, so again, I stress that you must have a V1 capability at the moment with your existing licenses, and you either at 2024X or will be upgraded. You will be able to upgrade to 2024X R2. The details will come, right? And you'll hear from your respective account execs from us, and this is going to be a very good, very exciting event.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So the next question is very interesting, and it's especially my line of work, so I have to ask. What is going on in terms of conformance? We know interoperability between tools was a problem with the older solutions. What has the standard on board already, Sandy, to make models more conformance, more interchangeable? Maybe Sandy can start on this one.
Well, certainly, it starts with being up to the tool vendors to be conformant to the specification. To the extent that they are, and they're conformant to both the language spec and the API and services specification, then they have the ability to be, as Daniel and others already talked about, this ability to be an interoperable component of the overall digital engineering ecosystem. So, it's basically the specification is quite clear, and the idea is that we'll be able to interoperate through that API, and potentially leveraging the textual notation that was referred to previously. Still have some work to do there to make that truly be an interoperable standard. It needs to add element IDs so that it can be exchanged. So that's basically where we are.
And on a more formal verification side?
So there is work underway to develop a conformance test suite that will allow you to better evaluate, a tool's conformance to the specification. But that work is underway right now. We expect to have that, over a period of time.
I have seen it. Chris, how is your take on this? On the verification, on the verification and interoperability. How do you think it's a big step forward? Small step forward?
Well, let me take the second question first, and then I'll circle back. So I'm going to take a different. I'm not going to talk to maybe the conformance tests or formal verification of the language itself. but I saw in the question and answer, there was a question around verification more generically, I think with respect to systems engineers executing the right-hand side of the V. So I would say that the change in the language has accommodated more of the right-hand side of the V concepts to include more in verification. So there's the advent of things like analysis cases and things like that. I think similar to the UTP construct and allowing for us to use and leverage the architecture for sake of being able to verify and validate our architectures in a consistent way in the same model or leveraging the same model. And so for me, that's a goodness, right? That was a thing that we had saw as a little bit of a gap, is that we could do a lot of the architecture decomposition and iteration down to getting a design that we could hand off to other engineering disciplines, but we really didn't see great concepts, at least in the way that we apply verification and validation at Lockheed. We didn't see a lot of great use of it there with the SysML language. We had to jump off to things like UTP. So I think what is happening with version 2 of the language is really encouraging, because we can capture more of those concepts and really represent the systems engineer's view into verification as it leverages the model. So I think that's good, and that's coming in V2 of the language. With respect to interoperability, yeah, the big thing for us is, systems engineering is one piece of model-based engineering in our construct, digital engineering in a DoD construct. But really what that talks about is systems engineering has to interface with all of the other design disciplines. And in order to do that, that usually means connecting models across those silos of excellence. And when we do that, we really need the features of interoperability that allow for that. So it's not purely just in being able to leverage model data, but it's connecting that model data and managing the entire design of a thing across all of those engineering disciplines. And in order to do that, we really need good APIs that are robust and that provide us with the right data to be able to connect at the right level. So it's not just files connecting to files. We're now getting down to elements connecting to elements, and that's really good. I think it's an advancement for the digital engineering practice.
We have a set of questions for the other Daniel. So the question is either what is the more concrete plans to roll out SysMLv2 in the DoD space? And the other question is, will only programs that use SysMLv2 be able to use UAF 2.0?
So across the DoD, when we think about that rollout perspective, we're really focusing on our collaboration with our military services and the various components. The interesting challenge that we face within the kind of DoD space is we do some engineering, but we also rely on our prime contractors to do a lot of engineering. And the reality of the situation is there's contract language that's embedded in the contract that says things like, deliver us a model in SysML 1.5. And so that's going to require a contract mod. It's going to be some back and forth. And so that's why it's really critical that we, on the kind of government execution perspective, we understand what the costs are, so that way when we do those contract mods, that we actually right size them and we understand which programs, as David got to, which programs need to be transitioned. So we're looking for currently where we can expel resources to do some parallel programming, parallel development, where programs that are already embedded in things like SysML, where we can actually come in and do some parallel work to help kind of show how it could be done. And then looking towards that future of how do we start updating our contract language, how do we educate through our kind of defense acquisition university workforce through our contract language and all those mechanisms that the department has to kind of move us in that transition. So for us, we're going to see everything from people jumping on it day one to people not jumping onto it. Okay. I am very much interested as I look to the future. I know David, when he mentioned it, he said that with SysMLv2, it's an evolution. But I'm looking at this almost as the V2 language really does provide us a revolutionary capability through deploying better AI technologies, through improving our integration and interoperability through the API. Being a little bit of a student of history, I look to kind of the advent of electricity when we kind of moved away from the kind of classic water wheel. At first, the manufacturers just kind of left all the machines in the exact same place when they had a mechanical beam running across it. And it wasn't until a whole new generation came in and they realized, wait, we can move these machines around and we actually see the scale benefits that electricity provided. So I'm really thinking about this transition in that kind of perspective of how do we start thinking and priming the workforce to realize that the way we do our jobs today doesn't have to be the way we do it tomorrow. And that's how we're going to maintain that speed of relevance to deliver capabilities to the warfighter.
Thank you. And do you, somebody want to comment on UAF 2.0?
I'll comment on it. So they've been at it for about a year. They've been working on the V2 extension based on SysMLv2. I don't know what their timeline is explicitly, but I know they're making good progress. We meet, Ed and I and a few others meet with the UAF team at each of the quarterly OMG meetings, and we review their progress and try and address their questions. But they're making really good progress, and I'm sure they'll be coming out with a timeline in the not too distant future.
From the conversations I've had with the kind of the team over in the UAF community, is I believe they're aiming for FY or calendar year 26, maybe 27, for that kind of expectation for UAF 2.0. That's their target goal. Obviously, the realities of standard developments tend to push things to the right, but that's where they're targeting.
Sounds about right.
Thank you. And I think it's very interesting what they do, because by building a standard on top of the standard, they are one of the best testers for SysMLv2 standard. So I have one question more in the INCOSE direction. David, how do you think the SysMLv2 initiatives will align with the MBSE SMS frameworks as defined in the SA Vision 2035?
Yeah, great question, Daniel. So there's been a lot of talk already about the connected engineering flow. Systems engineering was never intended to be its own silo. It was intended to be transdisciplinary. Now, MBSE and SysMLv1 have helped us advance systems engineering as our own practices, but oftentimes you'll hear me say that we've turned inward and haven't necessarily looked outward. Well, SysMLv2 explicitly addresses that with the API and standards. And now we can return our vision to the engineering lifecycle, the transdisciplinary flow of data, information, knowledge, to transform engineering. As Daniel said, this can be revolutionary. I believe we can reconceptualize the engineering lifecycle. The other aspect that I don't think we talk about enough is how SysMLv2 can fundamentally change reusability and specifically composability, whether it is at a system of systems level and we're looking to compose two systems into a new capability, whether it is at an organizational subsystem level and we want to reuse an existing subsystem, or if it goes out to a commercial off the shelf and we want to use somebody's component in our system. Well, with the strong semantics and the other aspects of V2, we have a much better chance of model interoperability out of the box. And if we want to start talking about composability of systems, from the part to the subsystem to the system of systems level, a first level approximation of composability comes from composability of system models. And I think this is a great accelerator of the engineering lifecycle, and it can help move us out of the mindset of engineering from first concept all the way down to the atomic level. We know that's not the way that we have to operate. We have to operate down to where's the reusable part. And I think this is a transformational capability in that area.
Thank you. So from my vision department, my personal Daniel vision department, I think what systems engineering misses most is something like GitHub for blocks, where you can get shared assets, proven assets, everybody is remodeling. Do you think SysMLv2 will be an enabler for this type of infrastructure that people get parts of their model from trusted sources. Daniel, how do you see this from an industry perspective or a Department of Defense perspective?
So how will we kind of get to that kind of better collaboration? Is that what you're?
Yeah, and how can we build a community, maybe as in COSI, where we can share common models, or build a library, you know? The first time I was asked this question was like, I think 11 years ago by a gentleman from Rockwell Collins. Why is there not something like Maven or Conan for SysML blocks or parts of models? And I'm just curious if this is a chance now for this type of infrastructures.
So I definitely feel like that with V2 we have that kind of capability. From a government perspective, to me that is a thing that I would look to industry to provide. Industry or the professional societies like in COSI, really to be that repository of kind of bringing together the practitioners. One of the big focuses we have across the DoD when we think about standards is we're not looking for the DoD to create more mill standards. We really want to learn the lessons learned that we're seeing from industry of how they communicate across their supply chain. How do we standardize on that and roll that into the DoD? That's how we're going to accelerate through the kind of innovation capital in the United States. The capability that V2 to provide the kind of repository, I think is great. It's now really incumbent on us to work with kind of the disciplines the disciplines and domains that would accelerate that. So for example, on the kind of modular open systems architecture side, FACE is a big one. That's really a discipline and domain space where you could really accelerate and go, this is how we're going to think about kind of aircraft design and stuff like that, to really get that reuse capability across the community, that we can then get that feedback cycle and that spin wheel really going back out.
Thank you.
Daniel, I'll mention also, we're within the OMG, this newly formed organization called the System Modeling Community. That will be a major emphasis, is to start to develop some reusable resources and kind of begin to build this community. In a broader sense, in COSI and the OMG are just putting together a new MOU that's a very broad MOU to facilitate collaboration between these two organizations. And we're looking to this collaboration to really help build and evolve these reusable assets over time. So on the OMG side, it will be the system modeling community, and on the COSI side, it will be the, if you will, the MBSE initiative and all the related working group activities. And we got to bring those together, identify those reusable assets, and start building them and making them available through the proper mechanism. So we'll be looking for ways to do that.
If I may add something, Daniel, I think I agree with David. This reusability is just such a huge thing, especially in the MBSE practice, right? But to enable the community reusability, I say, this notion of a common library that in a context interoperability, it really incumbent on the users in this context, particularly the two vendors, to be 100% true to the meta model. And I think Sandy mentioned that before. We need 100% conformant to the spec, not 99%. The 1% difference is going to break it, right? So that rigor is a must if we we want to really to realize this vision that as a community in the context of interoperability, that we can share and reuse the common assets. I just want to add that. I think Sandy mentioned that before. I want to, re-emphasize that.
Yeah.
I want to take this up because, you know, sorry, I shouldn't have opinions, but you're in my line of work, so I cannot shut up. What we have seen in intensive research, that over-profiling, customizing, building dialects of SysML on top of SysMLv1 was what killed interoperability more than tool vendor-specific implementations. Do you think the profiling on top of SysMLv2, the custom dialects, will again start with SysMLv1? Maybe we start with Chris.
Well, I'd be interested to hear what Sandy's perspective is on it, but from our perspective, no. I think in shifting in V2 to be based on kernel, another feature, I guess, of the new language is that you extend it using libraries as opposed to the profiles. And I think the advantages that you have there is that the libraries will be, I guess, more extensible over the top of the language constructs and probably work against some of the things that you're talking about, Daniel, where you're customizing to the point that you now have to strip away all the customization if you want to interoperate. I see the library construct as being a way to get around that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I also think that the customization or the extension, as long as you do it in a conformant way, it's still conformant. So, but I do think that, you know, within different domains, if you're doing automotive system engineering, you'll want to create your own extensions for, you know, particular domains. So I think that's perfectly legitimate, and it's what you would expect.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you just have to do it in a standard way, and you know, reinforce what Gon said. Tool vendors need to conform to the spec. That will be really critical. And then we'll need the discipline. We also really have to standardize on the practice within a domain, and for that matter, you know, across domains where it makes sense. Because if you really want to get reuse, you've got to standardize on your practices. I mean, I use the analogy, if you're putting a proposal together and everybody's writing different sections and they don't have a standard way in which they're writing styles, for example, then the proposals looks ad hoc. You know, it doesn't come together. So we've got, you know, when you have these complex models, we have to bring the rigor and the discipline of a level of standardization. Now, that's within projects, that's within a particular domain, and it's across domains at different levels. But we're going to have to apply a rigorous approach and apply conventions and standards. That will absolutely be critical to getting reuse and to getting the benefits of modeling.
Yeah, and I just want to echo, for me, when I think about the benefits and the rigor that we get through V2, but just as David mentioned, it's really an opportunity for us to go back external out to these other disciplines. Too often, we've kind of used our modeling as our visualization, and that we've been in a kind of a perspective where we need to go teach our senior leaders how to read SysML. And really, it's an opportunity for us to go, this is the language that we are using for us to do our work, but focus on where we need to provide better visualization for our decision makers. How do we answer the questions that our decision makers are really asking? And that's why we're investing in things like where a template, a digital engineering tool selection criteria template that really focuses on breaking out the kind of tools you would need, separating out visualization tools from our engineering tools, from our kind of workflow management tools, because that's where, when we treat them all as a uniform one-size-fits-all solution, the quick answer quickly becomes the only tools you're allowed to have is Microsoft Outlook and Microsoft PowerPoint, and that's what we're all trying to avoid.
Thank you. And I have to say a special thank you to Sandy. It was very, very good. And I think I haven't heard it this clear before, that you have to break with dialects if you want to have interoperability. We need standards for industries like automotive, for space, if we want interoperability inside the standards. There is quite some questions about learning SysMLv2. And David is not famous for having a SysMLv2 background, but he comes from a different walk of life. So I want to start with David. Do you think learning SysMLv2 is more difficult than learning SysMLv1, or is it too early to answer the question?
So I think it's a yes and no answer, Daniel. I think, yes, it's more difficult in that the scope of V2 is much larger. So the potential capability there for the practitioner, if you're leveraging the full power of V2, there's more to learn. But as Sandy and others have noted, there's more internal consistency to the language. The language has more semantic rigor and alignment, in my opinion, with systems engineering. So to get the basics is actually easier than it is with V1. So if you're just getting started, and if you're getting to the minimum viable threshold of a capability on SysMLv2, it's going to be easier. When you want to leverage all of the power, well, there's obviously much bigger scope.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah,
Anybody else?
I'd agree with that. I will second that, right? So, yeah, I think the logical, the consistent, the precise expression, it's easy to get started, but like Dave mentioned, once you get into the modeling with a scale, especially trying to leverage the full sets of capabilities, it can get difficult. The learning curve, I would say, I would expect to be high. Can easily get started, but from there, it could take some effort. So, because it's one thing is that if you're used to V1, there's a lot of differences. So you want to overcome that, right?
I guess the only thing I would add to that is it's good to learn the language, and depending on your background, where you start might be a thing, but I wouldn't get so hyper focused on learning SysML without getting the underpinnings of systems engineering process more fundamentally, right? I mean, we're just using the modeling language to describe the things that we do that executes a process. And if you don't understand what you're doing with the process, I'm not sure the language is going to help you. In fact, it might hurt you more. So I would throw that caution out there that you really need to have some foundation in systems engineering first.
Mm-hmm. One of my customers put it in very simple words. If you couldn't do architecture before, you will not be able to do architecture then.
Yeah, and the rigor really you really have to, have this OO methodology in mind when you look at V2, okay? Object-oriented methodology in mind. And that's something that's, I think it's my opinion, it's a big difference in terms of learning of V1, which is not so rigorous, and in V2 it's a great thing, but it does require you to have that methodology in mind. Going back to this is the fundamental system engineering methods, right? So
yeah, and one of the things that we're focusing on for our existing practitioners of version 1 is we're developing a quick start desk guide, that kind of piece of paper that sits on your desk to kind of help you translate and kind of learn. So we're in the middle of developing that. You can kind of reach out to one of us on my team, and we'd be more than willing to kind of get you involved in understanding what those pain points are, so we can really make sure that this desk man is useful to the practitioners across the community.
Yeah. So I have another question, because we had 2 or 3 questions in this direction already. SysMLv2 is based on kernel and not on UML anymore. Will this affect how we can create traceability between software artifacts or maybe business processes, BPMN artifacts, with languages like UML or BPMN going forward? Anybody has an opinion on this? And what will UML? Will there be a new UML built on top of kernel?
And so I'll comment. I mean, clearly it will impact the ability to integrate with software design in the near term. If you build a SysML model, it won't integrate with a UML model right off the bat. there are mechanisms that you can look to establish some level of integration. I mean, typically the system model is used to specify requirements for the software design and the hardware design. So you can clearly generate a set of requirements and pass that off in the form of a document still to software developers. But over time, there is a lot of interest in moving to a new version of UML that would be based on kernel. And so I think the longer term view is to build a software modeling language based on kernel. And of course, that would fully integrate with SysML.
Thank you. So another set of questions that I have seen is with a focus on product line engineering, PLE, variant handling, and so on. Does anybody despite Sandy have a take on this, or should we give it to Sandy again? So Sandy, it's your stage again.
Okay. Basically SysMLv2 includes some basic variant modeling concepts. Includes the concept of a variant. It includes the concept of basically a variation point. And it includes the ability to define variability constraints. So the notion, the example I typically use is, a car with, a 4-cylinder engine and a 6-cylinder engine. So in that case, the engine is a variation point. It can vary. And the variants are the 4-cylinder engine and the 6-cylinder engine. So you can be explicit about that in SysMLv2. You can refer to the engine as a variant, as a variation, and the 4-cylinder and 6-cylinder engines as variants. In addition, there's the constraints are built into SysMLv2, so you can use them to specify variability constraints. So if you select a 4-cylinder engine, then that requires that you select a manual transmission, for example. Or if you select a 6-cylinder engine, and that may require that you select a automatic transmission, for example. So you can impose those kind of constraints on your design. So it gives you a lot of capability to specify variability, basically out of the box. Clearly, we still look to the other capabilities and applications, for example, Big Lever and others, that provide variability modeling across the ecosystem, of which the system model is just one. So you're going to look at variability in your CAD model, variability in your analysis models, variability in your system model, and you bring all that together. And that's done through these other product line engineering applications. But we made big step towards providing some core capability to model variability in the system model.
Thank you. So the next question is, yes, it has to be, it's 2024. How will SysMLv2 help with integrating AI capability in R&D, namely systems engineering? We have a full set of questions about this. Anybody wants to take this one?
So I'm already seeing innovation coming out of the industrial base that focuses on how to use SysML with a kind of AI perspective. So companies like Stella, Cisket, Celine, I'm not going to Celadon, like we're seeing these companies that are going, hey, look, here's how we're looking to do it. And these are where they're new players into this market. Really excited to see what they're looking to do. And they're focusing on everything from how do we take maybe a potential library and use that to kind of automate and do some reasoning to create and accelerate the model creation. We're seeing it from the verification and testing of, do you have all the necessary test cases to kind of show that traceability? So we're really seeing the kind of innovation coming up through the the kind of industrial base to go, here's how we can use AI as another tool in our toolbox. And V2 provides that capability through the application of either that textual syntax or the API to really let these AI language models kind of take us to that next step and really accelerate our system engineering work.
And I'll build on that, Daniel. There's a lot of work going on, not only in the vendor community, but also in academia and in organization research that is showing these early proof of concepts and beyond. Now, one of the things is, I'm going to come back to that semantic foundation, the formal semantics. Large language models can interpret anything and infer semantics, but they're doing so on a probabilistic nature. And the moment you're probabilistic means there's a probability, there's a possibility of being wrong. As we move to tighter semantics, we can start to train AI on effectively small language models. How do you architect within your organization? Can your small language model pick up patterns? Can it pick up reuse? Can it be a co-engineer for you? And as Daniel mentioned, that is fundamentally enabled not only by the semantic aspect, but the API, the services, and that text basis. So you can now have AI actually propose an initial architecture, and you can start to co-engineer, particularly with a seasoned practitioner who can spot some of the probabilistic issues that come from bias and delusion. But it's a partner now, and it'll become even more so here in a couple of years.
Thank you. So if nobody wants to add something, we also have questions on ontology. Is there, do I need an ontology if I want to use the textual notation? How will SysMLv2 understand the, facilitate the need for an ontology? Anybody got the answers on these ones?
Well, I'll take a swing, and then everybody will tell me I'm wrong. But no, I think, well, a couple of things. Number one, standardizing on a data model that describes a system design using the language, I think is an important step. Once we have that consistent data model that allows for you to hang an ontology off of. And I think, as I was talking about, is at least in our journey at Lockheed, what we've been doing is connecting the systems engineering models to all of the other design models within the engineering enterprise. And, you know, that's useful in that we have some traceability across all of those things, but it's only mildly useful. So to the extent that we can define semantic relationships between models outside of just the systems engineering model, the more we're going to be able to reason against it. And I think that's the thing that's enabled with the version 2 of the language, because in version 1, we had a number of different implementations, and they weren't consistent with how that data model worked. So you'd, in essence, have to build an ontology for each one of those. It would describe your domain consistently, but the connections would all be specific to the way that they were captured within a discipline. So I think V2 enables that.
Yeah, I would add that, you know, kernel it can be viewed as an ontological language, you know, in the formal semantic basis that we talked about. It has a set of concepts and relationships that are formally specified. Mm-hmm. And then SysML, in fact, is a domain-specific extension of that into systems engineering. And so it also represents an ontology, in effect, for systems engineering. So I think they are ontological languages. And of course, the intent would be to be able to provide mappings to OWL, and there have been efforts to do that so that you can leverage some of the reasoning tools that are supported by OWL, such as Sparkle and the like. So that clearly is the intent going forward.
Yeah, and on the DoD side, we recently actually just finished sponsoring a CERC study. So nice quick read. The Handbook on Digital Engineering with Ontologies. I think it's in the final stages of getting publicly released. So I'm fortunate enough that I have the early copies, but eventually you guys will find it on the CERC website. But like just thinking about how the application of ontologies we kind of build this collaboration on is really critical. And and building out the research necessary to help communicate where things like SysMLv2 can come in and fill that gap as we communicate across multiple disciplines. And once again, for me, it's all about how do we go out and how do we communicate back out to the other disciplines instead of just talking about building an ontology for systems engineers. How do we make sure that that's usable and communicatable to the kind of program management layer, the engineering disciplines that we are kind of inherently focused on collaborating with?
Thank you. So we also have questions. Sandy, you notice this is gonna happen. We have questions. When will it be finished? What's still necessary to finish the standard? And I think we also would like to hear from our sponsor some opinion when there will be a commercial product that is not better. You know, these things have to be answered or talked around. Feel free.
Yeah.
Maybe we start with Gun, Sandy.
We're recording, right, Daniel?
Huh? Yeah, we are recording.
Yeah. So with respect to the spec, we're really trying to finish up and provide the final submission by the end of by the December meeting. Looks like we're not going to make that. So we're planning to move it out 1 quarter, and there's pretty much a hard stop. So March meeting is when we expect to have the initial vote by the OMG architecture board. So we'll submit. There's a 4-week rule. You submit 4 weeks prior to the meeting. So that puts us back into February. So that's when we will be submitting the final for adoption. We submitted the initial submission back last year, and that is so the beta spec is out there. That's what the tool vendors have been working on their implementations against the beta spec. But we've been in a finalization phase since June of last year. And there are just a lot of really hard issues that are being worked, and it's taking time, but it'll be worth it in the long run. And we'll get it, the final, as I said, in February, and then start the voting process at the March meeting. And it will continue after, then goes through primarily an administrative process before it becomes a final adopted spec a little later in 2025.
So for those that want to have a timeline, we can expect it will be an adopted standard by September 25 or so.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, once we submit, it goes through that initial vote. That's a pretty solid. You're in pretty solid position. I think coming out of the March meeting, we'll be able to say, the final's been submitted, it's been voted on by the architecture board, hopefully approved, and now we're going through the rest of the process. But the spec from that point on, we don't expect the final adopted spec to be different. It should pretty much be solid.
Okay. So, Gun, how do you see this from delivering a commercial product to your customers?
Just very good question. So I want to say that we, as the major tool vendor, obviously, we're in the lockstep with OMG, with the Sandy and the team. In fact, like I mentioned early on in this panel, that we will launch an early experience. So you will get our implementation almost immediately. And so the beta process really gives us an opportunity to not only implement the spec, but also validate it. And at the same time, we gave the feedback to OMG team, the finalization task force. And so I would expect, to a large extent, when it was final, will be robust. It will be robust. And then our implementation will be just as robust, because this is our plan, our intention, that will be 100% conformant to the spec when there's a the version 1 release on our end. One more point that I think be worth mentioning that standards like this is going to continue to evolve and improve. It's not going to be some date 2025, then there's a big launch and then it goes into a lockbox. It won't happen that way. And I fully anticipate, and Sandy can shed light on that, that they continue to improve in terms of functionality and robustness in certain areas. And again, from a commercial tool vendors perspective, we intend to be in the lockstep with that, and we'll be collaborating with OMG very closely and to help to evolve, to improve the language of the spec.
Yeah, if I could, I would like to add to that, because that is one of the powers of this process, is that the standard can evolve, and there are mechanisms to evolve the standard. So, for example, with version 1, started with version 1 way back in 2007, really, and then that ended up in version 1.7 in 2022, I think it was. So we will, and so the OMG has a revision task force that's chartered to address issues as they surface. So this will just be an ongoing process. There's a lot, and as we learn more from the uses of AI and technology and this and that, there's going to be lots of things to continue to evolve the language. That's a really useful aspect of this process. So.
Thank you.
Back to you, Danny.
So I think we are at the stage where we do final famous last words, and obviously on the topic and what you are really excited about with the upcoming SysMLv2 being finalized. And I think I can say that the recording will be shared with people that are registered afterwards. I hope this is not wrong what I'm saying now, but this is what I expect. We don't have a link yet. We should see when Mr. Organizer from Ecosi how this is going on. Maybe if somebody can add to their famous last word some takes on their chances to see with the API, would be awesome, and we would cover some more ground. And yeah, let's start with David probably.
So my famous last words here will simply be lean in. As Gon said, it's a journey. It's a long journey. And Daniel said the best time to start a journey is yesterday. The second best time is today. So lean into that, but lean into it with a specific context. It is very easy to lose ourselves in systems modeling. We're here to do systems modeling as part of systems engineering, as part of the engineering of systems. If we will always maintain that outward-looking context as we advance our practice, as we leverage these technologies, then we can continue to deliver the value that we need. But do lean in.
Thank you. So Chris or Daniel probably next.
So I'm a big believer that the DoD is looking to the future, and we are investing heavily in standards, be it SysML, be it AADL. We got standards up and down, left and right, the engineering discipline. And SysML is really one that we're very passionate about within my systems engineering and architecture family at the undersecretary level. The opportunities that we have to continue to engage in the community to address some of the pain points that we experience both at the DoD and the federal government is great. So we're looking at how we can continue to advance things around model signatures, how we can sign models. We're looking at classification, and really the capabilities that V2 provides is energizing kind of the community to go, how could we actually now coalesce around some sort of solution to address these challenges? So I look across V2 and I think about the fact that we're looking at a quarter of the engineering workforce is going to be affected by this transition in the DoD. We're estimating north of 30 to 45,000 some odd models that the DoD actively kind of cares about and focuses on need to be part of that transition planning. Everything from transitioning early to potentially never transitioning. And so trying to really understand that. So we're building a community. Once again, I think that we need to continue to build and share and experiment. And the more we talk about it, the more we share our lessons learned, the more we capture our successes in places like the digital engineering body of knowledge, the better we are in kind of communicating and all of us rising together. And that's really that opportunity of, if we all share and collaborate, we're going to accelerate into that future, and we're going to be able to utilize those AI tools that we're all wanting to use down the road.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think my last words would be, and it's probably appropriate that this is an INCOSE forum in which that we're sharing all of these things, but I think if you're standing on the outside looking at it and not participating actively in doing something, I'd encourage you to start, right? Jump on in, the water's fine. I think we'll get further as a systems engineering community if more people get involved and actually start playing and using the language and finding the corners where maybe we have something that we need to improve. I think that's the biggest thing. We will only get far as quickly as people contribute to the broader knowledge. And so I would really encourage people to make an investment, whether it's with their company or on their own personal time, into using the language and making it better and applying it in the ways that we need to as a community.
So I think we are just missing Sandy and Gan.
Yeah, I would do that. I'll leave the last word to Sandy.
Gan, I have a very special question that you have to face in. From our dear friend Aaron Gary. He asks if you will include simulation in 2025.
Absolutely. That's a simple answer. And you would, in fact, you will expect exactly the same level of support to simulation use cases as we do in V1. It's going to carry through as, you know, all the good things about usability and the user experience, you expect the same. So that was a great question, right?
That's why I kept it for the end.
But I want to re-emphasize the point that David and Daniel raised is about the journey. And it's going to be a long process. And the successful transition would require a community collaboration, right? Specifically, the OMG, from a standardization point of view, you know, they own the standards, they develop standards, and the broad user base, you know, from the government, right? And Daniel is leading the transition effort, right? Initiative to, you know, broad-based users, you know, such as Chris, and how they would use the tool, how they would, you know, really plan a product strategy, a development strategy around this, and looking at that, right? And you know, lastly, perhaps not least, is our two vendors, right? We have an important role to not only implement our solutions to fullest 100% conforming to the spec, but also talk about the question you just raised, right? How can we carry the best practice forward to enable our customer base? One of the things I want to re-emphasize is that we're committed to supporting our customer base. That's both in V1 and in V2. We do see in the foreseeable future, you know, that it's going to be, they're going to coexist, and we would design or define our product roadmap based on our customers and their mission needs, right? And that includes the model transformation or conversion. We're seriously looking at different use cases, and from the point of view where the source of truth in data will reside, right? It would be in V1, some cases, some cases in V2. And we're doing serious homework on these use cases to enable the community, the practitioners, to be able to plan their product and product strategy.
Thank you. Sandy.
Yeah, I mean, I just echo, I've heard a lot of really fantastic, insightful comments from the other folks here, and I wouldn't add a lot, but I just want to reinforce this, you know, and David mentioned that, you know, we're looking for good system engineering. That's what this is all about. That's what we're trying to do. And a model-based approach is a practice. It's how we perform our system engineering, and we've got to do that really, really well. SysML is a language. We've said this for years. It's an enabler of MBSE. It isn't MBSE in its own right. It's an enabler of MBSE. So in order to do this job and do it well, we need all the pieces have to come together, and we all have play a role in that. So we need we need the tool vendors to give us good tools, clearly. We need the professional societies such as NCOSE and working with standards bodies such as OMG to build a community and make various resources available. So that has to happen. We need the organizations to make the commitment, because this certainly requires that commitment. There's no doubt about it. I think the notion of starting with the transition planning and treating this as an incremental process, even if it's a revolutionary impact, you still got to implement it in an incremental way. So we need organizations to start that process. And then we need the practitioners to learn this, not only the language, but the methodologies and all the standard guidelines and all this stuff. I mean, really take it on and learn it over time. You don't have to learn it on day one, learn it over time. And by the way, it's fun. It's interesting. It gives you a means to express. So it's a really, potentially, I think you'll really enjoy it. But at any rate, we need the practitioners to learn this and then to apply it rigorously on their programs. And that really we're going to have to step up, because it takes time. That's a real demand on us as practitioners to do this. And we just have to really apply the rigor that the language enables. But you can still create very lousy models. No, there's no two ways about it. You can have a great language and great this and great that and come up with a really lousy model. So that it's up to us as practitioners to bring the rigor forward and really do good systems engineering, taking advantage of the language, the methodology, the tools, and the other resources, and do the job right.
And Sandy, the great place for all those practitioners and vendors to come together and collaborate is at the NCOSE IW.
It most certainly is.
Because we're hosting a big event, correct?
Yeah.
That's correct. The NCOSE IW, the MBSE workshop is the theme of the MBSE workshop is SysMLv2 transition. And that's on February 1st through the 4th in 2025 in Seville. So yeah, that's a good opportunity, a great opportunity.
And you will meet many of us there, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And the IW is perfect because it's an unconference. You can come there, hang out in the lobby, discuss with people, share with peers. I can only highly recommend going there. So now it's my time for the closing. First of all, as the Assistant Director for Standards at NCOSE, I want to make you aware that NCOSE invests money in helping people work on standards. So this is not just talking. There is money invested in people working in standards and working for NCOSE to make standards great. Sandy is one of these colleagues from NCOSE that gets support for doing standards work. And I think we can be really grateful that we have these passionate individuals that try to make the standards better and better over time. Yeah, I want to thank all of you for attending Calling All Systems, and we want to especially say thank you to Dassault Systems for sponsoring this format. And I think Gan is always nice to hear what he has in mind. So it's not just sponsoring, he brings a lot of value also from the other perspective. I want to say thank you to all of the guys, and I have one last question. Chris, when do you think the first production project will start using SysMLv2?
I guess nominally we would plan for whenever we get a finalized spec and a tool that implements, plus about 12 months is what I'm thinking. We're already playing, we're already doing things, but we're not doing any of that on a production program. So it's going to take some time with that to get a standard language out and a tool that implements it for us.
So roughly 24 to 36 months.
Yeah, if we have a spec in March, and if Gan gives me tools in March, then I would say 12 months from that.
Okay.
Well,
Awesome.
don't forget, OMG has to have its time to go through the rest.
Yeah.
So I would add another 6 months.
Yeah. So yeah, realistically, it's probably about 18 months.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. So thank you, everybody, and I hope you join in on the next one of these Calling All Systems, and all the others I want to see in Seville for some tapas and some great discussions on SysMLv2.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you. Bye
Thank
now.
you.